Rehypothecation. 2 years after, right, we had this conversation, the ETF was approved, right? And it happened in January of 2024. And now what's happening this cycle is the Bitcoin Treasury companies, which the vast majority of them custody their Bitcoin with Coinbase, right? So we know it's possible to have a public, Bitcoin address that anyone could audit. Tether, the Tether guys have done it. Paulo literally copy pasted it on X. 94,000 Bitcoin. The country of El Salvador, they have a public reserve, right? So we know this is possible, but we know, and I'm not going to name any names, but we know that certain treasury company CEOs are just like, no, the security. And I was like, that's not a really good answer to me. I mean, what do I know? I'm just a Bitcoiner. So has the rehypothecation risk increased or decreased since we had this conversation with Larry 2 years ago on the podcast?
The answer is both, because 2 years ago this was right after the blowups of BlockFi and Three Arrows and Genesis. They were rehypothecating very clearly, and of course, I'm forgetting the name of the be your own bank guy, Alex Mashinsky, Celsius. Thank you, Celsius. Right? They were clearly rehypothecating, and by the way, so was FTX. So very clearly, there were a lot of paper Bitcoins. There were a lot of Bitcoin IOUs not backed by real Bitcoins, is what I mean there, in those very highly leveraged companies that rightfully blew up. And perpetrators, in many cases, though not all, are in jail. They all deserve to be, and probably even more than will ever do time, because they committed a fraud on the part of their users. Now, here come the ETFs. The SEC did one thing right, and I praised them for it back then, which is that they prohibit in the prospectuses for the Bitcoin ETFs the custodians from rehypothecating Bitcoins. Now, they don't have to publish their reserves for proof of reserves. I wish they had gone that far, but at least there's a prohibition on rehypothecation. And, frankly, I don't know how examined these entities are. I don't know whether they're actually complying with that rehypothecation prohibition. My fear is that they're not, but at least the SEC did that. They kept it so that those ETFs could not end up being massively rehypothecated at the base layer custody of the actual Bitcoin. The securities, the ETF units themselves, are rehypothecated, probably 20 times at this point, because they're very liquid. So be careful, right? If you don't own actual base layer Bitcoin that you self-custody in your own wallet, then you're exposed to this counterparty credit risk of your custodian not having the actual Bitcoin that they say they have. So then the next layer of potential rehypothecators is just Wall Street firms. They have been prohibited by the Fed. Remember, I said the Fed's still blocking the big banks. The big Wall Street firms are all big banks. Not all of them. Cantor Fitzgerald is not, but most of them, Goldman, Morgan, Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of America, they are all Fed regulated, and they can't hold Bitcoin on balance sheet yet. The moment they start to be able to hold Bitcoin on balance sheet, there's going to be a huge rehypothecation wave again. But then you asked me about the Bitcoin Treasury companies. So far, I have not seen that they are rehypothecating. And to be honest, in a lot of cases, they're hardcore Bitcoiners like us who understand that if you rehypothecate Bitcoin, all you're doing is recreating the problems of the existing system. And so they're not playing three-card Monte so far. I'm not saying that I can attest to that. So do your own research. Go look at the filings for every one of these companies and see if they commit not to rehypothecating. If any of them does, frankly, please put it out on Twitter, because that's what happened with BlockFi and Celsius. People just reported on them. People who were looking at their customer agreements were saying that they were rehypothecating. It was there in black and white. And so, some argue that customers were warned about this. I look at it and say a lot of people, if you ask some random person on the street, what does rehypothecation mean? They would have no idea. And so if they were reading the prospectus, if they were bothering to read the prospectus, they wouldn't, if they saw that, understand what it really means. But when you tell them what it really means, everyone is, would just recoil in horror and say, are you kidding me? I'm giving someone money and they're turning around and lending it and might not have it when I want to and when I have the right to redeem it. But yes, that's what happened. So I would throw back to your viewers, if any of you know if any of the Bitcoin treasury companies are rehypothecating, bring it out. Go find it in the prospectuses. With AI, it's a lot easier to find that kind of stuff now than it was in the past. Bring it out. Let's get out and let's help each other learn and do the research on whether these companies actually have the Bitcoin that they say that they have.
So the reason I asked this question, Caitlin, is first of all, I really enjoyed that podcast that we did with Larry.
Yep.
And then I recorded one with Greg Foss and James Lavish, and then they took the other side. But I really enjoyed that. But the reason I did that question was to follow up to see if what your view is on it now, but also because of the price. And why am I talking about this? So generally, what tends to happen in Bitcoin cycles is the year after the halving, it tends to be a very good year for Bitcoin, right? And since Bitcoin's inception, we're sitting here 7 months into the year. Trump on Inauguration Day, the price of Bitcoin was at 109,000.
Yeah.
Right now, the Bitcoin
flat.
Price is at 109,000. Bitcoin has been a stable coin for 7 months, essentially, right? So, I'm thinking, I'm like, this is kind of strange. This is kind of weird. You're getting all these announcements from all these treasury companies, all these ETFs, they're buying vast amounts of Bitcoin, more Bitcoin that's being mined on a daily basis, and the price action is not reflecting that.
Yes.
So that's the motivation as to why I asked you the initial question.
Yeah. And I think the most rational explanation that I've seen is, look, $100,000 was one of those price points that is just psychological, that a lot of people who have owned it a long time, had laser eyes till 100K. And then I was one who took my laser eyes off, right? That tended to be a trigger point for people in their minds that they would sell at 100K. And we just saw this past weekend, the 4th of July weekend, a whale that had owned a lot of Bitcoin since 2010 woke up. I have my suspicions as to who that is. I don't think it's any of the people that have been talked about. But it's just because I know how that person thinks and transacts. And it might be that person just rotating their keys. I think that's my sheer, somewhat educated guess. I don't think it's a real seller, but that's the kind of stuff that overhangs it. Somebody's actually selling. Definitely, somebody's actually selling. That's the reason why, despite all this buy pressure, we're not seeing the price increase. What you're getting at, I think, is the question of whether it's all the financialization, the leverage-based financialization that's caused it. There's another piece that I missed earlier, which is all the derivatives, which cause the exchanges to delta hedge, and that can cause some price pressure as well. I don't know if that's big enough to be causing this price pressure. The derivatives markets in Bitcoin are still pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and they're still mostly mostly cash-based, cash-settled transactions, not physical settled transactions. So, at this point, all I can say is just be careful. We used to have the proof of keys days that Trace Mayer started, that would have started the entire, or did noticeably cause exchanges to have to hold more liquidity to try to keep the exchanges honest. Back in 2017, 2018, when all that got started. We don't have anything like that right now. I like the idea that some of the ETF managers have asked the SEC for permission to allow for physical settlement. You can do that in some commodity funds, that instead of actually selling your unit, you can actually elect to take physical delivery. There's no reason why we shouldn't be allowed to do that with a Bitcoin ETF. And if we get those funds approved, those funds are functionally proof of reserves because of the fact that you can physically settle and get your Bitcoin. It's still not as good as an actual cryptographically proven proof of reserves, but it's pretty close because you can physically settle. In a lot of these cases, it's still cash settled. ETFs are still cash settled. You can't take your physical Bitcoin. So what I was alluding to was that the futures and options markets are pretty tiny, but futures markets have gotten pretty big, but they're still cash settled. So now we're back to the debate that is the tail wagging the dog, and futures are driving the spot price. I don't think yet, but all this is in the milieu. It's all in the mix, and all of it ultimately is influencing the price. I just look at it and say, if those, especially for people who are getting into the Bitcoin Treasury game, which I applaud companies, I know of more coming, I applaud them for getting into the Bitcoin Treasury game, because Michael Saylor shouldn't be the only one. And frankly, it is a concentration risk. I do worry about what's going to happen when and if there's ever a contentious fork in Bitcoin again. I suspect there will be. You see some of the fault lines. You see all the quantum discussions right now. You see some of the, blockchain spam discussions right now. There are fights, legitimate disagreements among the developers in the space. And we could end up having another 2017 big split between communities here. And the more that is concentrated in the hands of the few, especially if they're not true believer hodlers, the more I do worry about how Bitcoin will be able to keep its decentralization. We need to stay vigilant. I agree with Jameson Lopp that this whole it's not atrophy or entropy. What's the word that he uses for essentially basically never changing Bitcoin ever again?
Ossification.
Ossification. Thank you. That ossification debate, I am absolutely on the side of Jameson and other developers who say you have to be able to upgrade the technology, but recognize that sometimes when you upgrade it, especially for things like quantum vulnerabilities that may come down the road. Lynn Alden's book also details a vulnerability that's coming in 2049. We have to, if we ossify, then we are not going to be able to defend Bitcoin against those kinds of vulnerabilities. We have to keep it decentralized, keep it user activated, keep it user and full node runner controlled, and not have too much concentration in the hands of too few people who are especially not philosophically aligned.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending, with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally not only have an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you today. Simply Bitcoin viewers get 0.25% off their first loan by using the link in the video/podcast description. What are you waiting for? Head over to ledn.io today.